the CEO and founder of Talk to Us. We're a consulting agency. We consult in the disciplines of branding and brand strategy enablement. The outcome. This includes marketing and sales, change management, activation and emotional connection, integrated communication across all stakeholders. Our agency side is all about execution and delivery, the output. From concept development, creative execution, narrative and lexicon development, advertising and brand asset creation, infrastructure setup and support of the digital backbone for communication, right through to provisioning the tools and tactics to your audiences according to their consumption preferences, generational relevance both internally and externally. We build confidence in your brand through your people using our proprietary, tried and tested framework comprising 5 focus areas. Development of purpose. It's about who you are, better known as the discipline of branding, and it is internally focused. Creation of activation opportunities for your audience to connect emotionally and experience what you do, commonly known as marketing and sales. Externally focused. We build a bridge between who you are and what you do for your people through self-awareness of every action undertaken. Hold a mirror up to yourself to reflect through focus groups, research and sentiment analysis to ensure continuous improvement. Surrounded by continuous, relevant, credible communication to all stakeholders. Our credentials. Get on over to our website. You'll find more about us, our latest offerings, our portfolio of works, resources from ebooks, vlogs, and thought leadership pieces. Great. So I think you will be able to see now where we're at, and as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about leadership hesitance. And I think the interesting part about this is really hesitance, the end result of hesitance or the outcome of hesitance is that execution doesn't happen. So it doesn't matter whether you've enabled the staff, but if there's hesitance, your strategy is not executed. And quite often that's caused by culture. And I think that's the other interesting area of concern, and we've seen that in a lot of organizations. So Renee, do you want to say something about that? Do you agree?
Yeah, so you might not often heard of this term that we talk about, leadership hesitance. It's just a term that we want to use to describe what in a culture, in an organization, causes leadership and or the employees in the organization to hesitate, and therefore strategy execution doesn't happen. And we are saying, as you can see there on the screen, that it is that hesitance, and we're going to talk more about what exactly we mean by that, is most often caused by culture.
Yeah. And I think it's a case of people hesitate because they're not sure, or they're not enabled, or they're not empowered. So let's go into it a bit deeper now. So I think for those who have been on our webinars before, they'll understand that we sort of like give you a bit about the topic. Then we give you some context and some background so that you have a backdrop in which this can be framed. And then we have 4 key points that we always want you to bear in mind when you look at this topic. We also, at the end of this, we will send you a recording of this, or you can get it on our on-demand. And you will also get a ebook which explains a bit more about it, and you can go and delve in a bit deeper, because we've only got 45 minutes, so we don't necessarily always get that deep into it, but it's enough for you to get a flavor. So there's an old way of thinking and doing, which is around our culture and values, and the fact that we take them for granted. And I think, Renee, we've always seen that when you go to an organization, the culture and the values are things that are stuck on the wall, and they're usually words that we'll all aspire to anyways, which is honesty and integrity. But really, what do they mean?
And the point that we really want to make today in this presentation is particularly in the changes that is that are coming about and will probably become a permanent way of doing things. That's why we refer to the new normal, is that if we take our values and if we take our culture for granted, we will probably lose it. Because the whole environment within which we operate, we need to think differently about how we're going to preserve those values in that culture, because there's different challenges in the way we work, and we'll expand a bit on that as we go through this.
Yeah, we've been talking quite a bit amongst ourselves about this concept of, and there's still so much information about the workplace. What is a workplace? There's no longer a workplace. And we were talking about, actually, it's now more of a work order that we're working in. What is the new work order as opposed to world order? Because everything's changed. And the culture and the values have always been driven by and large by the workplace and the fact that we're together. And so now we need to look at how do we create a new work order within our organization so that we still maintain a level of culture and values.
So say, for instance, one of your values was teamwork. There may have been a different way in which you promoted that value in the organization than what you're going to do now. And if you stuck in the old way of thinking and just taking for granted that that's going to continue, and you're not deliberately thinking about how we're going to preserve teamwork as a value now going forward.
Yeah,
that's what we're on about.
And I think that's the key thing, is a deliberate effort to make sure that you maintain it. So we're saying culture and values have been taken for granted, and in a lot of organizations still are. They're not focusing on that. They're focusing on what they're going to do from an operational point of view. But as we evolve into a new normal, which I think we're all getting tired of, so let's just call it a new work order, we have to fight to preserve our culture, and that should be more of a deliberate effort. So the 4 areas that we really want to cover around the leadership hesitance is, what are leaders without title? And so we sometimes speak about followers and why followers are important. And then we want to talk about culture eats strategy, and I think there's been a lot of information about that. And you know,
as we just said now, that in the previous slide, that hesitation, whether it's amongst leaders or those leaders without titles, because wherever you are in the organization, you can be a leader because it's about your influence.
Yes.
But the point that we were making is that it is often culture that causes hesitance, and that's why we're going to talk about that concept of culture eats strategy.
Absolutely. And then we also have effort and influence beats hesitance. So I think we've seen that a lot, especially in a lot of organizations who haven't embraced the fact that best they get onto the bandwagon and become digital, and they're hesitating. And I think that's a form of hesitance, and it's going to be their downfall.
And what we also want to refer to here is, we're going to talk a lot today about, especially in the culture context, that yes, a certain culture is necessary to avoid this hesitance that we're talking about, but it's not only up to management or leadership to create that. There's something that you have to do, and that's about your influence and your effort that you put into preserve culture and to have strategy executed.
And we all have that. We'll talk a bit more about it. It's the sphere that's around us, and how do we influence that? Because we all can do that. And then lastly, really, it's setting ourselves goals. That's the ultimate answer, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if you we say that goals are the ultimate answer. So what gets you out of being hesitant and or being inactive is when you have a goal. So we're talking about the power of goals here to overcome hesitance or lack of execution in organizations. Companies, leadership teams come up with great strategies. And they really are great, because the guys that came up with them are the guys with lots of experience and insight, but yet those strategies don't get executed. And why is it? Because they don't cascade that strategy into executable goals.
Sure. And I think we've all experienced that in this last while. We all believe and realize that we do need to get out of bed in the morning and get up and get dressed. But I think the bed's nice and warm, and you just think, well, I don't have an office to go to, I might not have an online meeting, you know, so that inaction is actually people's downfall. And if you get this right, you know, you'll build confidence yourself and your ability to do something, but you will also build confidence in your brand and everything that surrounds that. So let's just go a little deeper into the context. You've got the 4 things that we're going to be covering. Let's just start the context with a bit of a story, which you've all heard, but let's just give you the inside info. Renee's done quite a bit of research on this.
So we thought that this story is quite a powerful way to illustrate the point that we're trying to make today about culture causing hesitance. We all remember the story of Nokia. Nokia in 1998 was the best-selling mobile brand in the world. Apple didn't even exist at the time. And I think all of us, that particularly those of us that are a bit older, our first cell phones were Nokias. And we thought that we were always going to have Nokias for the rest of our lives. I mean, to illustrate the point, over the period 95 to 99, the operating profit of that business went from $1 billion to $4 billion per annum. By 2007, half of the cell phones that were sold in the world, half of the cell phones were Nokias. Only 5% were Apple. But Apple started making a little bit of inroads, and so Nokia in 2010 launched a new phone called the iPhone Killer. And that didn't succeed. And from there on, the Nokia story started declining. And Nokia went from being the biggest brand in the world to being a distant second. So the quality of their high-end phones started to decline. So there was something wrong with the way that they were working and the output that was coming out of the business. In just 6 years, the market value of the business declined by 90%.
I think the interesting part for me there is the time. 6 years is not a long time. For that to happen, yeah.
And why did it happen? Why did this all come about? And like I say, we want to illustrate our point about the impact of culture on causing hesitance or on galvanizing people to the right thing. So it's our belief that it was leadership hesitance. We did a lot of research into what happened with the business during the time of their decline. And on the next slide, actually, I've made a short list of some of those characteristics of the business during the period of decline.
Sure.
That one, yeah. So there's a lot of evidence that there was a lot of organizational fear. So
a cultural issue.
And a culture of fear. And we often see that in businesses, and there are still some of the old school leaders that think to rule by fear is the way to get things done. So there was a big element of fear in the organization to tell the truth about what was really going on. And what I've seen is that they had an operating system at the time that was actually inferior to the competitors, particularly Apple's, and it was going to take a lot of innovation and a lot of capital to align and to become more competitive. And the people in the middle management layers didn't want to tell top leadership because of the culture of fear.
I also think you probably found top leadership didn't want to tell their investors that they are going to have to invest if they want to retain them. So
that's exactly what happened. Yes. And so temperamental leaders at the top, they thought we've arrived, and that so often happens with big brands, is we've arrived and we don't have to do anything further. We can just ride on the success that we've had up until now. And so, like I said earlier, people were scared of telling the truth. And so the business became paralyzed.
Yeah, and we've seen that more recently in a car manufacturer who had emissions that weren't accurate, and actually look at the damage that they did to their brand and their brand reputation. And when you delve in further into that, it was a similar thing. The leadership were demanding that they meet the emissions criteria, and they realized they couldn't. So they changed the program to give false readings. And as a result, they then were able to satisfy leadership, but eventually that house of cards came tumbling down. It was huge reputational loss for them, as well as financial. The fines they had to pay in that regard was unbelievable.
They're still battling to recover, and everybody knows which brands we're talking about here. But it's the so-called soft stuff in organizations that at the end of the day make or break you.
And it's interesting because we were involved in helping them here in South Africa start turning that culture around through training their people that speaking up is quite okay, that speaking up can be an acceptable behavior and practice. So those are some of the things that we want to talk about in more depth. But before we carry on, we just want really for you to answer a quick poll. So the questions for this quick poll, Renee is just going to take us through the thought process, but if you can scan in that code or go onto that link, I think there's 3 questions in that.
Yeah, in this first, we're going to have 2 quick polls today, and really the reason for the polls is to elicit a little bit of participation from the audience, and for you to just think about how this may relate to your own environment, your own circumstance. So in this first quick poll, like Linda said, 3 questions. The first question is, in your organization right now, is culture clearly aligned with strategy? Just think a little bit about that and say yes or no. And then the second question is, do you think your company's culture has been affected by the lockdown realities, yes or no? And was that impact for better or for worse? So those are the 3 questions we'd like you to think about. Charles is going to give the feedback at the end.
Yeah, right at the end. So we'll give you the feedback afterwards. And in fact, we've been promising to take the last, I think we must have about 10 or 11, 10 webinars and compile all the information out of it and put it into a report. And then at one of our last meetings, we actually thought, why are we doing that? We'll just have another webinar to get feedback on it. You know, and all the results, and I think it's the way in which things are done. So we will record we will do a webinar on the feedback of the last 10 sessions, because they're all related to what our remit is in the greater scope of things, which you've seen right in the beginning. We sort of showed you what Talk to Us does, and all of our webinars have been related to that, and just try and give you a picture, an overall picture of what's happening out there. And I think we'll probably do that after the 4th one. And then we'll do a webinar just on that, and we'll also record that so that you can go and have a look at it, and there will be some kind of report on it. But, you know, in the meantime, if you can answer this question, if you haven't already, we'll just give you a few seconds longer. I was saying to Matt, how cool are emojis? What would we do without them? You can have a whole conversation just with emojis.
Powerful.
All right, okay, let's move on, guys. So let's start with the first area that we spoke about, is leaders without titles, and really looking at the sphere that you have around you and how you can influence it.
So the point we're making, so you'll remember that the title of this webinar is Leadership Hesitance. But we don't just, in talking about this, refer to the guys with the titles of leaders.
No.
We're making the point and the argument that anybody in the organization is a leader if you behave like a leader. In other words, if you realize what influence you have and that you exert that influence, and hopefully in a positive way. So your sphere of influence, as we indicate here on this slide, consists of a whole lot of different elements. The first one there that we want to talk about is, and the emphasis here is on what you can do in your organization, whether you have the title of leader or not, and not say they must, but what can you do? So you need to be worthy of trust. Linda, and it's that the work from home thing is yes. got put a much more, even a much different angle on this whole thing about trust, because A lot of can't see what you do, but they can see your output.
Yes, and a lot of organizations are still battling with it. Can you believe it? They're still wanting their people to be in the office despite the risk that they might be facing with that. But it's about trust and transparency. And I think that's become a key issue that we need to look at. We were talking about not everybody is a leader, but we also believe that there are followers, and everybody follows somebody, whether you like it or not. The executive board follow what the shareholders want. The shareholders follow what the public wants. So everybody is as much a follower as what they can be a leader. And so I think it's time that we break down these concepts of leaders being something which are up there and followers being something which are second rate, because that's no longer the case. And you can just see that old-minded mentality of leaders and followers out there. If you go and Google how many books are there on followership, you'll find that there's one book for every 20 books on leadership, which I think really shows you that it is something which is underrated. Yet everybody needs to be a good follower for someone to be a good leader. And are you, as a leader, a good follower as well? So I think that's part of it. And this really speaks to some of that.
And just to that point, is followership is such an important and fascinating topic that that Linda's been speaking about, having a whole webinar just about that. So look out for that. So part of also your circle of influence, and Stephen Covey spoke about how one makes your circle of influence bigger and bigger by practicing these things that we've got up there. So we spoke about be worthy of trust, be accountable. How can you demonstrate accountability? By having goals, and that's what we're going to talk about towards the end of the presentation. But then also to stand and be counted, stand and be measured. So if you have goals, there must be a actually public visualization and acknowledgement of are you achieving those goals? Because that creates accountability, as people can see they're doing it or they're not.
And I think that acknowledgement publicly is important. So often somebody will go and say, oh, Renee, you've done such a great job, but nobody else knows about it. And that public acknowledgement boosts your confidence, but it also improves your sphere of influence, and it also creates more followers, because if Renee's got it right, maybe if I do what she does, I will also be able to get it right. So it's a bit of a knock-on effect, like dominoes.
Yeah, 100%. Then think on how to keep living the values. I spoke earlier about not taking your values, your organizational values, for granted. So the whole environment that has changed in the way that we interact with each other and with our customers, we're not proposing change your values. They should be enduring, your culture, but you need to think about how to fight for that culture, because we need to do things differently to preserve our values. So think about what that may be in your organization and how you might have to change your behavior to preserve those values.
I think also understand what meaning your values bring. If you just have values which say integrity, well, so what? You must take out that so what factor. And if it's integrity, how does that align to our purpose and our strategy? Try and create meaning around it, as opposed to just saying, being able to parrot fashion say it's integrity, honesty, trust. I could give them all to you. Yeah, I could teamwork, I could customer excellence, I can give them to you on my 10 fingers. But how do they create meaning for you in your environment? And that's also important.
And Linda just spoke about purpose now. So it's something that's very important to us at Talk to Us, is the whole notion of becoming a much more purpose-driven organization and purpose-driven world. And I think that the changes we see around us are making companies and leaders far more aware of purpose over profit, and of what is the meaning, what is the why of our organization. And in the same way, as an individual in an organization, think about what's your own purpose and how is it aligned to your organizations. And then the last point there is show care. And again, I think that's a value and a behaviour that's becoming much more prominent as a result
Yes.
of the changes that we're living
Yeah,
through.
I do think so. I think there's always been a thought process of I'm okay, I'm 10 and I really don't care what happens to you. But I think in situations like we have today, all of a sudden you realize that, your neighbor might be important and be really instrumental in helping you survive. As are, I don't know how many people have ever even thought of what nurses do and how they do it and what value they add to society. So I think everybody adds a value to society. As we have gone and visited many companies and they have many requirements, we often sit and look at it, and I always, I think to myself, okay, you make potato chips, and you go to their factory and you see what they do and how many people's lives are impacted about it. You realize that every small thing that is done, there's a whole ecosystem behind it that holds it up, that builds it, that maintains it. And so that care that we need to show is really important. It's a care for everybody. It's not just for, I'm in it for myself.
And it comes back to this whole thing of purpose. If you can link everything that everybody understands and does to purpose,
sure,
then it doesn't matter what their job in the organization.
Yes.
And we speak about that a little bit later, about this whole thing about ownership and a sense of belonging, because that's what purpose does.
Yes, it does. And I think we're not only talking about organizational purpose, we're talking about your purpose within the organization. And I think that's something that people often forget. So I think you've just seen this, but what we want to emphasize here is that everything that we talk about, it's about building confidence in a brand. And I think, and when I talk about a brand, I mean an organization, which is well known nowadays as a brand, but it's done through your people. It's not done by the marketing department, which unfortunately is a big remit for the marketing department, but often people do think it is just done by the marketing department. And I think the area that we want to talk about here is the main area is the purpose side, understanding the purpose, and then how do you enable the strategy.
Yeah, I mean, we also said the important thing is each of us from where we are must understand our responsibility within all of this. To not hesitate, to execute strategy, to understand and fight for the culture. So the self-reflection and the self-awareness thing really is just as important in that picture.
And it was interesting because I've just been watching a new TED talk by Simon Sinek, which I'm sure everybody knows, that emotional connection. He always talks about that emotional connection, and that is part of that circle of influence. How do you connect with people around you, and how do you expand that sphere of influence? So yes, that's all of those things are what our focus area is. And quite interestingly, we've noticed that around the world, the way in which people deal with what they commonly known as their human capital, and we were just saying we don't think that's such a great name anymore, because capital is something which you can depreciate and appreciate and sell it off and whatever. They're not. They're people with potential. So Matt and I came up with a nice name for it last time. The potentials, that's what we decided, or something like that. But that's what they are. They're not human capital. That has become a key thing. So how do you look after your people and retain them and make sure that they are interested in helping you build the company circle of influence? And that happens through good people practices and the way in which you deal with them through trust and honesty, but it also happens through being able to communicate with them in a way that is not, it's transparent and it's honest and it's open and it's sincere. That's what I'm looking for, sincere. That sincerity is really important. So, right. Let's move on to the next part now, which is really around the effort and influence, which beats. Sorry, I'm up here. I've just got myself lost for a second.
Just a little bit in a hurry.
No. I think this kind of like leads direct there, but never mind. So let's talk about the Culture Eats strategy, and I think you've all heard that saying before.
Yeah, so it's Peter Drucker, the management guru, that came up with it. Some people say he said culture eats strategy for breakfast, dinner, and lunch. I don't know which one of those he said, but I think the important point here is that no matter how fantastic your strategy, if your culture, if your climate, your culture, your value systems in your organization is not, if your strategy is not aligned with that, and if the two don't speak to each other, strategy will fail. And I mean, there's a lot of statistic about strategy failure, 60 to 70%, depending on the source you believe, of strategies fail and of change efforts fail. And it's very often because culture hasn't been taken into account. So yes, as our picture shows there, culture eats strategy.
Now, something that's very interesting for me is we often find that organizations in their strategy, they talk about being innovative. We're an innovative organization, we've got innovative ideas, but their culture does not allow their staff to experiment. And if their staff fail when they experiment, they whack them over the head so they get back down under the pulpit again. They don't want them to experiment. You know, so there's a typical example of a misalignment. If you're an innovative organization and you want innovation, you have to let your people fail. You have to have a culture where fail is acceptable. And I think often that's an issue.
But another point, and we speak about purpose all the time. You hear us speak about, we spoke about it the whole time now, we speak about it in all our webinars and all our interactions with our clients, is the importance of purpose, the importance of your why. And I think in the environment, we all know now that purpose is becoming your why, your reason for existence, as an individual and an organization is becoming more and more important. So yes, whereas Peter Drucker said culture eats strategy, we say purpose eats culture eats strategy. Because without purpose, you are rudderless, and you're, and especially again in times like this, if that is really your North Star.
And I think it's something we were just discussing a few minutes ago, is everybody will tell you, oh, our purpose is to make money. No, your purpose is to serve the public and to produce and to provide a service or a product. The fact that you get paid for that is a by the by. It's not your reason for existence. And I think a lot of people get that so wrong, you know, and that is why you get so much dissension amongst the people who are not there, and they're not there because they're just capitalists and they're just in it for the money. They really want to make a difference.
Coming back to the Nokia example, for them it wasn't a static thing, but clearly they were more driven by that profit that we referred to than by what is our real reason for existence. And you compare them with Apple, who in their purpose statement never referred to cell phones, never referred to money, never even referred to technology. They're talking about making a lasting change to the world.
Right.
And that's a reason for existence. That's why we say purpose before even
everything
culture
else.
And strategy.
Sure. And that's exactly what Microsoft are doing at the moment. They wanted to enable everybody to have a digital, and just look, had we not had a digital ability and capability, what would have happened to us now? You know, so, you know, having those purpose statements which sit above everything else is extremely important. It's like Elon Musk, who wants to make interplanetary life possible. You know, that is his purpose, you know, so it's quite interesting just how different it is. And it starts, as always, with the owner or the shareholders or those people.
The founders.
Yeah, the founders.
Yeah, and then just to say there that at the end of the day, all of those snack on structure. So many times organizations and leaders are trying to be mechanistic, and they want to think we must make a structure first, and that really comes last. It should, your structure, be it your organizational structure or your processes and your rules and stuff, should follow from those first three things, and not guide your business as the main.
It's a bit like communication. You know, whenever people want to send out something, the first thing they say is, how am I going to send it? Okay, but what do you want to say, and who do you want to talk to? You know, because if you tell me what you want to say and who you want to talk to, I can tell you what you should send it out on. But their first thought process is always, do I put it onto Facebook or do I put it onto Twitter? And you say, well, what do you want to say? So it's the same, it's the same issue, isn't it? Yeah. Right. And here we really talk about, you know, how do you enable it? And you'll see the little picture in the middle saying culture helping strategy up. And there's a couple of areas, and we'll just, I think, load them all, and then we can talk to them. Okay.
So again, what we want to say here, Linda referred to values earlier on, and there's this set of generic values that you see over and over again in all companies, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what the question that we are asking is, does your set of values give you these 4 outcomes? Because it doesn't matter what you name your values, what those values are. If those values don't give you these outcomes, in other words, if it doesn't empower your people, if it doesn't promote ownership, sense of belonging or esteem, if those things don't happen, then you will not be able to execute strategy. And again, that just emphasizes the point that culture goes ahead of strategy.
Absolutely. And then, one of the things that comes from here is the head, the heart, and the hands. And we're going to talk about that now, which is really, it's all good and well to think about it and to consider it and to have posters on the wall, but you have to enact it. And that's really vital. So we'll move right along now. And this time we will go to efforts and influence beats the hesitance.
Yes. So again, to make the point that at the end of the day, yes, leaders must create an environment that enables execution and that works against hesitance. But you as an individual, through your level of effort and the level of influence that you exert in the organization, and it's about what we want to talk about here now is how you yourself perceive your level of influence. So do you think, when you think about where you are in the business, do you think you have influence or don't you think you have influence? And it's a mindset thing. So we're basically saying, depending on where you are in this grid. So if you perceive yourself to not have influence, and you're also one of those people that don't put in a lot of effort, then we tongue in the cheek call you a Klingon. The younger generation, I think, don't know what Klingons are, but the older
Star
generation...
Trek people, Star Trek, not Star Wars, Star Trek.
And so why do we say it's a Klingon? Because if you're in the business and you're not putting in effort and you don't have influence, you're just hanging around there, you're really dead wood. But we don't mean dead wood in the sense of the word that it's not possible for you to make a contribution. That's why Linda speak about human potential. Those people might be people that's been long in the business and that's got a lot of knowledge and we need to draw them out of being Klingons. If you have a perception that you don't have a lot of influence, but you're still somebody that's an ant, you work hard. You come to work every day and you work hard, but you don't think you can really influence anything. Then you're a gladiator, so you're fighting hard, but at the end of the day, you're disconnected from purpose.
And nobody's seeing it because you're not influencing anything. So you are feeling resentful and held back, and you just feel like, what am I doing here? And so you definitely have those in a business.
And then I think that we think that the guys there in the top left-hand corner are the most dangerous people in the organization. They are people with influence. They could be in leadership positions or they're technical experts, but they do not put in effort. For whatever reason, they're not engaged, they're not motivated.
So
they're wearing the verb.
That's actively disengaged. But they will always talk about how engaged they are.
And we use the Venetian mask because they have this mask of we are here and we engaged, but they are not, and that's why we call them dangerous.
Yeah, dangerous and actively disengaged, which is a huge problem.
And obviously we want everybody to be there in the corner of the lion. They are people with influence and effort. Put in a lot lot of effort and they forward the culture.
So I think it's that's quite important that we get that mix. We try and move people from here to there or from there to there, which is really we're moving them from the gladiators. And your easiest ones to move are to move your gladiators from gladiator into the lions. They're the easiest ones to move. The others, it's a bit of a struggle. But whenever we get leadership to speak to us and they say, well, how do I get everybody engaged? you need to firstly decide where you want to spend your money. And so you spend your money with the two areas where you've actually got the biggest impact, or you can make the biggest impact.
So coming to the point again about overcoming hesitance, because that's what we're all talking about here. If the people that put in the effort and that have a perception that they can exert influence, the people in that line corner are the people that are not hesitant.
Sure. And those are also the people who have goals, and they set them up, and so let's just have a look at the goals.
So goals eliminate hesitance, is what we're saying there. So that's probably one of the most powerful things that bring people into action, is where they have goals. Think about setting yourself a goal of getting fit, losing weight, or whatever it might be, getting cleverer.
Losing weight during lockdown is not a good idea.
But it is a goal that gets you out of bed every day, so it makes you not hesitant. So, but what we see often in organizations is that the plan and the strategy is all in the heads of the guys there on the top left-hand corner, the top management, and it doesn't cascade down. So that's why we talk here about a hierarchy of goals. So obviously we bang on about this thing about purpose. Everything must be founded in purpose. That gets cascaded into strategic goals, tactical goals, and operational goals. But an important point we want to make here is that the old way of doing things is that it's the top management that does the strategic goals, the middle management that does the tactical, and the first line managers and the workers that do the operational goals. But
the heavy lifting.
With the level of influence of employees in the organization changing, and COVID is a catalyst for that, because people are there's more power in their hands if they so choose, in a positive way. Employees are moving up that chain, as we show there on the right hand side. So it is so that the middle management layer in organizations have been shrinking for long, and I think it's accelerated now. And employees are going to play a greater role in tactical and strategic role and linking things to purpose. So, but I think the message is that it is goals that will energize people into action.
Absolutely. So we are running a bit over time, so we're going to move right along to our next poll. And this is the last poll, and then we'll give you the feedbacks and our session will be over. So maybe, Renee, if you want to just take them through the questions for that.
Yeah, so on this poll, we're bringing it back to what we've been discussing here all day long. So this quick poll is about values and strategy. So the values part is what we have been discussing now. And we want you to think about your own organization, and on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being poor and 5 very well, how would you rate your company on empowerment, number 1, number 2, sense of belonging, number 3, care about self-esteem of employees, and number 5, goal orientation. So maybe just take a bit of time now and quickly give yourself, your organization, on the score on those. And Charles will give us the feedback in a short while.
So we'll wait a short minute or so for you just to submit your answers. And
Linda, you wanted to talk about your new streaming initiative.
Yes, so we will be doing. We have developed a streaming calendar and program really for moving forward. It's indefinite, and there are certain shows that we'll be having. So there will be shows around how do we take back the weekends, because I think the conversations we've been having with a lot of people in these webinars is they feel there is no weekend anymore. So although they might be there with their children and they're allowed to come into the room, there is no longer a weekend. So how do we change the work order back to having a weekend and getting up on a Monday and feeling refreshed and ready to tackle the week and having goals for that week? So, we've got a program which really is going to explain that. And then we also have a catch-up. So in the evenings, we've had a couple of people say to us that they love the webinars. They are so useful. They find maybe 2 o'clock is not great or 8 o'clock is not great because they've got meetings. And so we're having a catch-up of all our old webinars, of all our old videos, and we'll give you a breakdown of that on our program. And if you like our YouTube channel, our Facebook, Can you please click on the likes below? Can you follow us so that you'll know when we're going to go live, and you can join us if you want to. And then on our website we'll also have a link through to booking a consultation, and we'll give you some categories, and you can tell us if you'd like a free consultation. We'll give you a call and we'll talk to you about some of the areas in your business that you might feel useful, bearing in mind I'm not going to come and run your factory floor for you, but when it comes to communication, execution of strategy, change management, activation of projects, we can help you. We've even been organising social distancing events at the moment, which is a challenge, but what a fun challenge. So any of those are something you're interested in, if you click on our book a consultation, we'll have a chat with you. Alternatively, all our details are on the web. You're always welcome to get hold of us. So maybe let's just go into our last sort of like insight for the day. But really, the thing is, if we get the hesitance eradicated, it's smooth sailing, and we'll see success, and we'll build confidence. And so what does success look like? And that's the key thing. And I think every initiative, every project you tackle, you should always ask yourself, what does it look like? And so the first one is ownership.
Yeah, so if you can eradicate hesitance,
yes,
and you have done all those things that we spoke about today, then you will have created a culture where people have goals, they take ownership of those goals.
Absolutely.
And that ownership overcomes hesitance, and that ownership allows you to make sure that there's execution.
Sure.
Because we spoke today about, we come from a point where there isn't execution, so how do you...
It also is something which gives you energy. You know, if you set yourself a goal and you achieve it, it gives you the energy and the inspiration to try and do another one, and to try and do another one. So the spiral climbs up as opposed to the spiral going down. Okay, so absolutely, that is one of the key areas. And then of course confidence. And you know, we talk a lot about confidence, and people ask us, what is the whole thing with confidence? People are drawn to confidence. It's a bit like a magnet. They are attracted to it. They want to cuddle up to it. You know, they enjoy confident people, confident brands, and really that's what we're striving for, because it is an attractive quality, is it not?
Yeah, so the outcome, the success picture is you're going to have a confident brand, a confident organization, confident individuals in your business, if you can break the negative of hesitance.
Absolutely. And then again, the thing that we, as Renee says, banging on about is we're aligned with the purpose. So hopefully we'll achieve the purpose. If we can break the hesitance, we'll achieve the purpose. And that will also make us a renowned brand and a confident brand. And then lastly, the strong goal orientation.
I mean, at the end of the day, the numbers are important. You see, we speak about that last, because all these other things, the whole notion of purpose before profit, but you can't sustain your business without achieving goals, without, you know, and at the end of the day, without achieving your quantitative objectives. But if these others don't come in front of that, you are never going to realize that. So we're saying at the end of the day, that enables the achievement of your goals is if we look after that, the so-called soft stuff, as we said in the beginning, which is really not the soft stuff.
No.
Stuff that Linda said she'll come and do for you in your business is really the hard stuff.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. It's the tough stuff. And it's tough because it's unpredictable. Unfortunately, humans are not predictable. And so people don't like unpredictable. It takes them out of their comfort zone. And it's a good place to be, as we've all found out in this last while. So I think Charles might be ready now with our results from our quick polls. Charles, do you want to share those with us? Can I hand over to you?
Yeah, thanks very much, Linda. Just share the presentation with me. Okay, so there's the results from poll 1. Your organization, is culture clearly aligned with strategy? 3/4, more or less, a little bit more, feel no, that it isn't. Do you think that your company's culture has been affected by the lockdown. Again, the 100% response rate, that one, which I think is probably what is expected. And then for better or worse, majority feel for the worse. That's poll number 1. And then the results for poll number 2 is how well is your company doing on the empowerment side. Average score there was 3. And how well is your company doing on the sense of belonging? Average score is 4. And then how well is your company doing on care about self-esteem of employees is 3.5. And then lastly, how well is your company doing on goal orientation? The response there was 3. So back to you, Linda. Thank you.
Thanks for those. That's quite insightful. I think we have noticed it. You know, we've noticed it with a number of our schools. The children are battling, you know, and I think the teachers are too, because they're not used to online learning. I think the people are battling this disconnect and this inability to, you know, to have our morning coffee chat or muffin and just check in with everybody and say, how are you doing? How's today been? How's the week been? How's the weekend been? And then just to sort of get to the end of the week and say, hey, you know, I think we've done a good thing at the end of this week. Let's all sit down, put our feet up. I think people are missing that. And how do we bring that back into the work environment? What do we do, you know, to change that? Because, you know, from all the research that we've been doing and all the things that we've been looking at, this is with us for 18 months to 2 years. And I think that's quite scary in some ways. But I think, you know, I think that, you know, we can't call this the new normal. This is the COVID normal, you know. And I think that brands are battling because they are now what we call glass box brands. You're all living in a glass box. You know, there are a number of brands who've been living like that for a long time and have been able to cope with that very well. But I think every brand is now a glass box brand and they're not used to that. So things are getting out onto social media long before they've had a decision as to how they're going to talk about it and what they're going to say about it, and their staff are all in the front line. So the concept of being in a glass box and the brand's people are now in a glass box and are being frontlined and don't have the necessary skills has really very much become something where I think people are out of their comfort zone, and that is a problem. So I think it's very insightful news, that.
And that's why we also said today, you know, the old way is to take your values for granted. The new way is you're going to have to fight for those values. Yeah. And that's, you're going to have to apply your mind as to how you're going to protect your brand, your values, all of those things.
Absolutely. So I'd just like to thank everybody. Thanks to Charles, who's our producer and puts the whole thing together, and we would be lost without him. Thanks to Renee for being here today. You'll see Renee again pretty soon, I'm sure. And then if you want to watch this again, look at our on demand. It's on our website. You can go and have a watch and you can go and pass on the link to someone else. Next week, Thursday, we'll be back. Our session next week is reality-based decision making. And what is that and how does that work? And then, like I said, if you like what you've seen, click a like. If you'd like to follow us, click a follow and then share this with your friends. Thanks very much for your time. And thanks, Renee. Thanks. All right. See you soon. Bye.
All right.